Hi 210 students, this is your bi-weekly reminder that we are now moving forward into chapters 3 and 7. We will cover class and socioeconomic status and language, both really interesting topics. I came across this book in my library the other day, Rethinking School Reform. It has multiple authors, but the editors are Linda Christensen and Stan Karp. It has, I don't know if you can see this, it has a lot of stuff in there about critical teaching, so that hits the critical thinking component of our course, and taking bias seriously. Actually, Lisa Delpit has an article in here, and there are some other things. What color is beautiful? Presidents and slaves, helping students find the truth. Once Upon a Genocide, Columbus in children's literature. Lots of really great things that you could use to supplement this class or on your multicultural research project. It goes on to talk about education policy and politics and how some students benefit from that and some don't, standards and testing, and the roads to reform. So it was written in 2003, which was a while ago. A lot has changed, but I still think that the common theme remains that our schools need to be equitable and that teachers need to really focus on meeting the needs of all students, however that might look in their classroom. So I wanted to read a little bit from the first article, Rethinking Our Classrooms, Teaching for Equity and Justice, because a lot of you answered that Brown versus Board question about using schools as a site for social reform. And this gives you some better ideas of how that can look in a classroom today. Obviously, in the days of Brown versus Board, it was pretty dramatic, and a lot of things were happening that may not have been super safe for young children. So a lot of you mentioned that school should be a place for reform as long as it's safe for students both physically and mentally in the long term. And that was a very good thought, observation, recommendation. But here are some more practical ways and the reasoning behind why we should be teaching for equity and justice. So forgive me for reading aloud to you on a video. I didn't want to scan and have you read even more because I know you already have so much on your plates with the information I've given you. So really quickly, I'll point out a few of the major themes in this excerpt. In Rethinking Our Classrooms, we begin from the premise that schools and classrooms should be laboratories for a more just society than the one we now live in. After more than a decade of high-profile national debate on school reform, we think that this proposition is more central than ever to the success and perhaps even the survival of public education. Schools have crucial obligations not only to individual students and families, but to our society as a whole. Their success or failure is tied not just to personal well-being, but to the prospects of creating a multiracial democracy capable of addressing the serious social and ecological problems that cloud our future. We live in a world plagued by economic inequality, endemic violence, and racial injustice. A me-first, dollar-driven culture undermines democratic values and seems to invent daily new forms of alienation and self-destruction. Over the long term, the production and consumption patterns of industrially overdeveloped and underplanned economies like ours begin to threaten a global ecological disaster. Given such unpleasant but inescapable realities, education reform must be driven by a far broader vision than it has been in recent years. What happens every day in our classrooms both shapes and is shaped by the larger social currents that define who we are as a society and where we are headed. Accordingly, to be truly successful, school reform must be guided by democratic social goals and values that provide a deeper context for more traditional academic objectives. Too many schools fail to confront the racial, class, gender, language, and homophobic biases woven into our social fabric. In a social justice classroom, curriculum and classroom practice must be grounded in the lives of students. All good teaching begins with the respect for children, their innate curiosity, and their capacity to learn. Curriculum should be rooted in children's needs and experiences. Whether we're teaching science, math, English, or social studies, ultimately the class has to be about our students' lives as well as about a particular subject. Students should probe the way their lives connect to the broader society and are often limited by that society. Social justice classrooms should be critical. The curriculum should equip students to talk back to the world. From an early age, students should be able to ask essential critical questions like who makes decisions and who is left out, who benefits and who suffers, why is a given practice fair or unfair, what are its origins, and what alternatives can we imagine? What is required to create change? Through critiques of advertising, cartoons, literature, legislative decisions, foreign policy choices, job structures, newspapers, movies, consumer culture, agricultural practices, and school life itself, students should have opportunities to question social reality. Social justice classrooms should also be multicultural, anti-bias, and pro-justice. We've talked a lot about this already. A social justice curriculum must strive to include the lives of everyone in our society and examine critically their histories and interconnection. With some 40% of the students in public schools from communities of color, while more than 90% of teachers are white, we need to address directly and constructively the racial, class, and gender dimensions of educational inequity and school failure. We need to move from what anti-racist educator Endon Lee calls the soft stuff to the hard stuff. This means not only celebrating our diversity, but also helping ourselves and our students understand why some differences translate into access to wealth and power, while others become a source of discrimination and injustice. Social justice classrooms are participatory and experiential. Traditional classrooms often leave little room for student involvement and initiative. They encourage passivity, which is reinforced by fragmented, test-driven curriculum, and that discourages students from taking more responsibility of their own education. However, our classrooms must provoke students to develop their democratic capacities, which means they need to be involved. They need to be questioning, challenging, and making decisions and solving problems collectively. Our classrooms must be hopeful, joyful, kind, and visionary. Children must feel significant and cared about. That's the classroom culture and the school culture and the importance of a safe zone for students. And then activists. We want students to come to see themselves as truth tellers and change makers. If we ask children to critique the world but then fail to encourage them to act, our classrooms can degenerate into factories of cynicism. So talk about issues, but then make a plan for what you're going to do about them. These classrooms should also be academically rigorous. A social justice classroom equips children not only to change the world, but also to navigate the world that exists. A social justice classroom offers more to students than traditional classrooms and expects more from students. These classrooms are culturally sensitive. Critical teaching requires that we as teachers admit that we don't know it all. We know from our own experience that creating successful critical classrooms is not easy. It's demanding, it requires vision, support, and resources. But the alternative to critical teaching for social justice is to surrender to a system that, left to its own logic, will never serve the common good. We can teach for the society we live in, or we can teach for the one we want to see. Rethinking schools is for those with a vision to reach for their dreams. So those are a few things to consider. My favorite thing about this book, or actually collection of articles, is that it's written by real teachers with real perspectives. So get your hands on this if you get a chance, and I look forward to seeing you in the discussion board area and grading your work in Blackboard over these next few weeks. Be sure to look down a few posts in the announcements area. I've posted a video and some resources for your multicultural research project. Also, I will be posting soon information about the next NACCE Future Teachers Club event, which is based on the Reggio Emilia approach. And I think I said that right. Anyways, I will be checking back in with you in a few weeks.